That is the Norwich City players telling you all you need to know. Championes, they have done it with 96 points in style, beating Reading 4-1 at Carrow Road on Saturday. The beer and champagne was flying again, and it guarantees that Norwich will be lifting the championship trophy at Oakwell on the final day of the season. Welcome to a very celebratory edition of the PinkUn Norwich City Podcast. Dave Freezer here, alongside Paddy, Davitt and Connor Southwell. Also coming to you on Future Radio 107.8 FM. And we've got lots to get our teeth into. But before we get into the sort of celebratory nature of it all, boys, I felt like, as well throughout Saturday, really, that there was a bit of a element of relief to the whole thing, you know, to the stewards we spoke to, the staff. It was hopefully, touch wood, the last Carrow Road game behind closed doors. And for me, Pad, as we left the stadium, that was the prevailing thought, having spoken to the players and Farke and everyone, that it was great. You know, it's brilliant they're back in the Premier League. It's great that they've won the title and done so well. But without the fans, okay, there was a couple of hundred having a bit of fun outside the City stand. But without the fans, it still just feels that little bit hollow, doesn't it? Yeah,
well, I mean, the man himself, Mr. Farke, he used the word surreal. And I think that I can't think of a better word, really, to encapsulate that vibe. That a season unlike any other, with a point tally unlike any other, and possibly, 30 wins, is it? I think, Connor, you pointed out after the game, if they were to do the business at Barnsley. I mean, these are like, well, not even once in a generation, or maybe once in a history of a football club type levels of achievement. And not to have any supporters whatsoever in that stadium. Well, I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about the impact of the pandemic in terms of football and no crowds, and that was the peak of it yesterday. That achievement was played out against the backdrop of, well, a PA system blaring out tunes in homage to Timu Pukki, and players throwing champagne about and throwing other liquid onto their head coach. Total disrespect on El Hernandez. You have a word with yourself there, son. But just sad in a way, very sad in a way that that joy and that pride, which I'm sure is clearly there remotely, albeit we can't tap into it this weekend because of the social media boycott that ourselves and a lot of football bodies, clubs, other media are observing, and a lot of fans, to be fair, as well. So you don't even get that remote sense of really the scale of the achievement. So, yeah, I think surreal. We'll probably leave it there, really. But nevertheless, in years to come, this season, fans or no fans inside the stadium will stand alone as good an achievement as anything this club has achieved in its 1902 they were formed, so getting on for 119 years, I think it's as good as anything, really. Which is probably a pub debate to be had when we're allowed to go back inside pubs, obviously due to the roadmap. That isn't until May the 17th in the UK, but I struggle, and that's a big claim to say. It is the biggest achievement, because what defines an achievement? Is it winning at Wembley in a one-off game? Is it a period of time like a season? But I just think with everything they've had to contend with, and Daniel himself said it perfectly, he was really, really, really good, I thought, post-match, and we've got his video, it's on PinkUn.com, please go and have a watch of that. He said it's the hardest season he's ever had as a coach, the amount of effort he's had to put in, the things he's had to deal with, not just football-related matters, the whole issues around the pandemic and the impact on his squad at various points, players actually contracting coronavirus and having to self-isolate. For all those reasons, you run out of superlatives to describe how good he has been, and his players, and Stuart Webber, and all the backroom staff. And if you're a Norwich fan waking up today, you must be extremely proud of your football club.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope all of our listeners or viewers, if you're watching on YouTube, managed to find a way of savouring it and enjoying it. And the social media side of it did add a strange element to the weekend, which is unfortunate from a Norwich perspective, but clearly it's a much bigger issue in terms of racism and abuse on social media. So hopefully football has used its profile to make a bit of an impact there. And as you mentioned them there, Pad, just to go over those records. So 96 points is a club record. They've got 95 in League One in 2010 and 94 in the Championship in 2004 and 2 years ago. So that one's already in the bag. We've already talked about the away records. It's the best away record in the club's history. Home isn't quite as far up there, but it is among one of the best. They have the opportunity, as you've mentioned, to get the most wins. They've pulled level with the League One season, which was 29 wins overall as well. And as long as they avoid conceding 5 at Barnsley, then they will have the meanest defensive record in the club's history as well, because they've only conceded 34, and that record is 39 at the moment from the 2004 Nigel Worthington team. So, Connor, while we were busy getting on with stuff, and I really should stress that PinkUn.com, not only has it been everything that we normally do when social media is up and running, but we've made a real push and an effort to make sure there's even more stuff for people to get their teeth into and to try and reflect as much of this fun and games as we can do. So I hope that has come across. But Connor, while we were working away after the full-time whistle, we could slowly hear it getting louder and louder outside, couldn't we? And we eventually saw all the photos and the videos and stuff coming through. And okay, the COVID police probably wouldn't be particularly impressed, but there wasn't a lot of social distancing going out there. But a few, say 250, 300 fans just couldn't resist themselves, could they?
No, it was like a party that we hadn't been invited to, wasn't it? It was a bit like that. We were kind of stood at the window hearing all the noises and watching the videos come through, and we weren't there ourselves. But no, it was good. I think given the pain and the absence that fans have gone through this season, I think if you are to criticise them for having this moment where the players join them, Daniel Farke joined them, I think you'd have to be very cruel because of the impact that they've obviously had this season on those people watching from home. I think for a lot of people, they will have provided a lot of joy and a lot of relief probably to what has been an incredible year and a half for everyone. I think an incredible season. I mean, beyond those very limited amount of fixtures before Christmas where fans were allowed in, and obviously that Preston game as well early on, they've been completely shut off. So for Daniel to go out and sort of pay respect to them, for the players to go out and celebrate with them, I think is a really lovely touch, and it just helps, I think, unite those fans with those players, and there'll be some players in there, Ollie Skip, Jordan Hugill as well, that those fans won't have seen and won't have been able to celebrate. So it is a really nice moment, a really important moment, and it was really good to see that they had that moment. There was obviously pictures of Delia, wasn't there, from the window of the lounges, and just to have that sort of togetherness in a year that was really sort of blocked that off, I think is so important. And yeah, those celebrations were really good to see. I think after what the players and the club have achieved, I think they deserve that respect and that celebration after what the fans have been through likewise. So yeah, nice to see. I'm glad it's not gone down to the final day, because I don't think anyone would have fancied travelling to Barnsley, having to win or get a point, knowing the quality that they have, knowing the FA Cup game as well. But now they go there, they're probably going to get a Guard of Honour and they're going to get a Championship trophy. So even before they've gone, it's going to be a pretty good away day, I think. But yeah, nice to have those moments and those celebrations.
Yeah, Farke's sort of mates with Valérien Ismaël, isn't he, from their coaching courses and stuff. So, who played for Bayern Munich, and he was a well-known player in Germany and stuff, and has done a brilliant job at Barnsley. It has to be said this season. So, yeah, you'd like to think there's a Guard of Honour. Right, before we get stuck into the game, if you're listening via podcast, and we're going to edit in some audio clips here, which is Kenny McLean, Tim Krul, and Kieran Dowell. Although I have to admit, the first half of Kieran Dowell's audio, despite being about 6 foot away from him, I couldn't really hear it because the music was turned up so loud and the players were celebrating so much. So for the audio listeners, here's a bit of that, a bit of those interviews. Your goal, the second one in particular, how pleased were you with that finish, and what an assist from Cantwell?
I know, I was saying to him, it was put on a plate for me, a nice present for me. I had one early as well from Javi, which the keeper saved well, so it was sort of similar position. But no, yeah, good finish.
Well, that's it. Yeah, so a lovely goal. And so I think that's 6 you finished up with in the end of the season, isn't it? So considering the amount of football you played, that's a decent total, isn't it?
Yeah, take that. I don't know how many starters been, but I like to just score as many as possible. I think probably could have got more, could have got another one first half maybe. So there's always them little, you always look at those. But no, 6 goals, I'll take that,
Just lastly then, how excited are you for the Premier League then? You got a little bit of a taste of it when you were younger, didn't you? But now you get a proper go at it.
Yeah, I think proper, like you said, proper go. No, I can't wait for it. Be thinking about it all summer. I think trying to stay fit and get ready for that,
Top man. Nice. Have a good night. Cheers. Just very quickly, in a sort of reflective way, when you joined from Aberdeen, you were excited about this move. You thought this is great, but you've just passed 100 appearances, second promotion, second title. Could you have ever imagined it would go quite this well?
I mean, two league winning seasons in a league in the Premier League. 3 years I've been here now, and it's been thinking about it now, I've not really took it all in. Maybe I will when I retire, and it's been the best 3 years of my career. Hopefully I can continue that. Hopefully another successful season next year, see what it brings. I'm just loving my time here, to be honest with you. That's it. I've got a family here, so everything for now is good.
Congrats, Kenny.
Thank you. Cheers.
You said in an interview in Holland recently that there was a little bit of Premier League interest last summer. So how pleased are you that you stuck with it now? Like you say, you signed the contract and second title in 3 years.
Exactly. I mean, I've always said I wouldn't leave this place for any reason. It needs to be seriously, ridiculously better. And like I said, the loyalty that the club showed me when I wasn't flying, I mean, that counts for a lot. So that's why I signed again in January, and because it's a risk for both, because we weren't promoted, and the club, they gave me the commitment from their side, and I just, me and my family we're really happy here. So this club is the reason I'm back in the national team, and hopefully fighting for #1 spot in the summer to go to the Euros. I mean, where we were 3 years ago.
Let's get stuck into the game, and a 4-1 win, Pad, and Kieran Dow. Well, we should say the first half, Reading were good, weren't they? Reading turned up despite their playoff disappointment and stuff. They showed a real bit of mental strength, really, to show that determination and cause Norwich a lot of problems. And then it's really Pookie's persistency which sort of brought them back into the game before half-time.
Yeah, I think everything Daniel Farke said about him on Friday, for me, was evident in that first half, that they have some very, very, very good young players. Elise, young player of the Football League at the edge of that, Max Aarons, and Harvey Elliott at Blackburn on loan from Liverpool. So that tells you all you need to know about how good that young man has been. He's still only a teenager, looks an excellent prospect. Ovia Jaria on the other side, he's a very tricky customer. He's bigger, actually, than I thought he was, because you're quite distant at Reading in terms of where the media sit in relation. That's quite a cavernous stadium, but to see him a bit closer up, he's a big lad, and he's got ability, and Jow on his day as well. Really, that front 3 or 4, I mean, a lot is made of how good Norwich's front 3 or 4 are, and they are. They're the best in the division. But if you take Norwich's 4 out, I'd take probably Reading's as the next. I think they're really as good as that. The potential, the movement, the speed that they pass the ball and they break the lines, and they cause Norwich huge problems. They got in that pocket between McLean and Skip, and Norwich's back 4 too often for comfort if you're Daniel Farke in that first half. And they did cause them a lot of problems as well, and probably should have gone in at the break ahead. But the reason they didn't is because the other thing Daniel said is that, they have a lot of young players and they're a bit naive and they make some mistakes, and they get themselves in good positions this season. But the fact that they've just tipped out of the top 6 tells you they don't really have that game management element. And some of the errors they made at the back, notably for the first goal and also the fourth goal, to be fair, were pretty basic individual errors. And that's where they are as a club. They have the potential to be in and around, and Daniel thinks they'll go on now and have a very good season next season. He's obviously a huge fan of the work Paunovic has done there, and you can see there's a lot of similarities with how Norwich go about the task. And the question I'd have now is, will they be able to keep the Elises and the Ajarias this summer and 1 or 2 others? Because I'm sure they'll be interested in those players. If they do, then they'll have a good attempt at it. So, yeah, and they clearly were quite keen to spoil the party. I think that Paunovic said after the game that they wanted to delay Norwich's title celebration. So they started like that. But once, for me, Norwich got themselves back on level terms, rest of that first half, and more so the second half, you know, I did ask Daniel what on earth he had said to him at half-time, because it was night and day. Tim Krul barely touched the ball in that second half. It was all Norwich. And in fact, if it wasn't for Rafael Cabral, his opposite number, that could have been getting up around Huddersfield proportions, because he made some excellent stops immediately after half-time. But obviously then, when Dow scored his second and the second of the game for Norwich, the dam burst, and obviously this went on and, you know, won it very comfortably. But, you know, Daniel said, well, you know, yeah, there was a few words and talked about the soft skills, and they made a couple of tactical tweaks at half-time. But ultimately, I think what you probably saw and the final margin of victory underlined it is a team who are, you know, fully grown and mature. Yes, they've got young players, Norwich, but they've got the Krulls and they've got the, you know, Hanleys and Gibson when he was fit, and Hugo in and around it, and Tete, and obviously Pookie at the top end of the pitch. They have very experienced core of players against a team who have the potential to be decent at this level, but are still learning their trade. And you can see that the way that the game panned out, that Norwich almost by the second half were just toying with Reading, and it was credit to the champions that they did respond, because by no manner of means did Reading come to roll over. That is for sure.
Oh, yeah. If it wasn't for Raphael, that would have been 6 or 7, wouldn't it? Because he made 3 excellent saves at the start of the second half, and Norwich absolutely burst out of the traps. And the finish from Kieran Dow, so that was 64th minute when Norwich actually claimed the lead. By that point, Watford were losing at Brentford anyway, so we were kind of we were pretty relaxed in the press box that we were going to be covering a title triumph in the next half an hour or so, weren't we, Connor? But that finish from Dow was lovely. He'd had a very similar situation for one of those brilliant Raphael saves that was set up by Kintia, but that one in particular, a gorgeous pass from Cantwell, as well as a lovely finish. And I was particularly pleased because I did my column on Kieran Dow on Saturday morning, didn't I, saying, you know, there could be a Premier League player already in the squad there who could a bit like Cantwell look good in the top flight, and the rhythm of the game might suit him nicely. But to have 5 goals in 9 games now, he is coming along nicely, really, isn't he?
Yeah, and I thought that was his best performance actually in a Norwich shirt today. Not just in terms of the goals he scored, but his overall contribution. I think we've seen the bursts of quality, that Derby free kick, the goal at Forest, but sometimes he's had a habit of being lost in games a little bit, and it didn't really feel like that yesterday. He was kind of central, I felt, to what Norwich did, and there was that moment, wasn't there, where he flicked that lovely ball over the top for Timu Pukki to run onto, and again Raphael saved that. So he's really coming along nicely. He's finding some momentum and some form at the right time, and I was going to mention what you mentioned there, 5 goals in 9 games, which, given we spent so many minutes on this podcast throughout the season just sort of debating that number 10 position and whether they needed to strengthen it and how they'd approach it in the summer, he's kind of answered that, like you say, and there is potential there. He's got a knack of scoring goals. He gets in positions at the right time. He could have had another one in the first half when it was dragged back to him and he just failed to keep his balance. But just a really positionally aware, intelligent footballer, very technical as you come to expect with a Daniel Farke player. But that second finish from an angle, I think most players maybe in their mind would have thought to cut that back. He didn't. He looked for the corner. He found it. It was an excellent finish from a lovely Todd Cantwell pass. And some early signs really that he's beginning to integrate himself into what Daniel Farke wants in that three behind Timu Pukki with Cantwell and Buendia. So I don't think the talent's ever been in doubt. Maybe it's more about him getting up to match speed and almost finding his role in this Norwich side a little bit as that number 10 and really working out what Daniel Farke wants him to do. And I think yesterday was an indication that he's moving in the right direction. If he can take that into Barnsley, repeat it again, and then into the summer and pre-season, then that number 10 issue doesn't become bigger than it needs to be, does it? It's quite clear that will be his at the start of the Premier League. So he deserves a lot of credit, I think, for the way he's responded to that injury, because there was a point, as I mentioned, where you began to wonder whether or not his Norwich career would ever really get started. And to his credit, he's knuckled down. He's started producing. We're starting to see the numbers that we'd hoped to see. And he's found his role in this Norwich City side, so he deserves a lot of credit. And Norwich, as you mentioned, Dave, have an option there if he can kick on for the Premier League, for sure.
He has a cracking left foot on him, doesn't he? And, he had a brilliant loan spell at Forest. He was very good at Wigan as well. He won their goal of the season, didn't he? So, if you just look at the basic stats, which I got in front of me here, Dow's got 6 goals this season. Vrancic has got 3. Steepman only got 1, although I think we can sort of discount Steepman a bit with everything that he's been through with his illness and stuff, hasn't he? But, Vrancic, 2 of those goals, of course, were massively important, weren't they? The late goals against Birmingham and Wickham. But in terms of assists, Vrancic has got 5 and Dow's only got 1. So they're only the headline stats. That clearly doesn't tell the full story. But we may have seen quite sort of muted goodbyes, mightn't we, Pad, really? Because Vrancic and Tete did come onto the pitch for the last 10 minutes or so. We don't know what's going on with their future just yet. But from what Daniel Farke has said, I think you can pretty much read between the lines at this point, can't you?
Yeah, I might be struggling here, Dave. You might have to take over again. This cough, which is nothing too untoward other than man flu. In fact, I think you might want to throw that to Connor, mate.
Yeah, all right, I'll give you a chance. But yeah, Connor, yeah, I mean, there was lots of emotional hugs for Tete and Mario, wasn't there? So beyond what Daniel has said in recent weeks, it's not looking likely either are going to be here next season. And they've both been such great servants, haven't they?
Yeah, and both played their part, haven't they? Crucially, Tete, obviously, over a longer period of time. Mario Vrancic was Daniel Farke's first signing. They're both really thought of warmly, I think, by Norwich fans for different reasons. Vrancic for his ability, I think, to unlock defences, to play wonderful passes, those brilliant free kicks, and almost his ability to, which he did 2 years ago, which was almost single-handedly pull Norwich City over the line to secure promotion with that goal against Blackburn, free kick against Sheffield Wednesday. The problem, I think, for him probably is the mobility side of things, and maybe age is slipping away from him now. And when you think about the Premier League, and we noticed it last time with Norwich, you need athleticism and energy in midfield. That's why Ollie Skipp was brought in this season. And it's not a kind of issue, I think, with his technical quality, because I think he's still as good as any midfielder Norwich have, certainly in the central areas on a technical basis. And the way I kind of describe it is, when you look at Kenny McLean, he's maybe not as technically proficient as Mario Vrancic, but in terms of energy and the defensive side of the game, he's better, and that's why he gets in ahead of him, and that's why I think Daniel's maybe sort of considered him as a number 10, and an area that maybe the demands on the defensive side of the game isn't as big. And for Alex Tete, it's been the season where they've managed to kind of source a replacement, haven't they, on a temporary basis, Ollie Skipp. And now the challenge, if it is goodbye, is going to be finding a permanent one if they can't retain Skipp. And obviously it's a bit of a fluid situation, because we're not entirely sure how that's going to pan out. Now you can obviously throw an injury into the mix, but what a servant he's been for Norwich City. He's seen it all, hasn't he? Relegations, promotions. He's got one of the best smiles in football, there's no doubt about that. And I think he's always given his all to the club, and that's all you can ask, I think, of a player. And it is the end of a generation in many ways, because we've seen it a lot in recent years with Russell Martin, Wes Hoolahan, John Ruddy. If this is the end for Alex Tete, then I think a lot of people will remember him in good stead. He's got the most appearances of a foreign player, isn't he? Non-UK and Irish player at the club. He's going to leave with a lot of history, and undoubtedly as a Norwich legend. I think the only sadness is, and I think he told you last year, Dave, didn't he, that he wasn't too keen on a testimonial, and that's probably his modesty coming across. But if it is goodbye, then I just hope that there's a way that supporters can pay tribute to him, because he's been excellent, and I think he's held in probably higher regard than he realises by supporters, actually. And yeah, hopefully if this is the end, then next season when Carrow Road is full and rocking again in the Premier League, they can get Alex Tete back on the pitch to say his goodbyes. I think that would be a nice moment for everyone.
Oh yeah, that would be quite an emotional moment, wouldn't it? So we'll see how that one develops. I guess it won't be too long before we hear about them. We did during this week, we had Michael McGovern's contract extended, which everyone was expecting, weren't they? Another 2-year deal, and it sounds like he's probably going to be the third choice still, which is what he was in the Premier League last year, wasn't it? So he's probably edging towards a bit of a coaching and motivational role and things like that. But yeah, Pad, that segue sort of nicely into Skipp, really, which was the one negative element of it, wasn't it? Him being on crutches during the celebrations. You never know. I mean, Farke has sort of said that we're not going to know for a little while what's happening with Skipp, but it might just end up being a little blessing in disguise for Norwich, and it means if he's not fully fit, and that Tottenham think, okay, well, maybe he is best to go back out on loan.
Well, let's hope so. Yeah, I'm hoping a Hall Soother has done the job. Other cough sweets are available, obviously. If there's any other manufacturers. If there's any manufacturers out there who are listening to this and want to send us some cough, me basically, feel free. I'm open to product placement when it comes to cough sweets at the minute. But yeah, and also, I mean, the way Daniel was talking, he thinks it could be long term. It's a bit early yet. Not quite sure. Broken foot, sort of ankle damage. He continues to be assessed. We're obviously just a few hours after the final whistle, really. But when Daniel's talking in those terms, and that's the initial physio assessment, and he's, as you say, rightly, Dave, he's on crutches, and they had a protective boot on him when he was on the pitch for the celebrations. It's sad that it's going to end that way this season. And then the bigger question probably is, given it's all done and dusted, is will we see him again in a Norwich shirt? And that is a potential one silver lining to the scenario, that if he's essentially, if we're talking a long part of the summer, he's going to be unavailable and maybe only getting back to full fitness into the new season, that probably means he's not going to really be in the thoughts of whoever succeeds Jose Mourinho at Tottenham, because he's going to want players in the here and the now to go to be ready for Tottenham for the start of the new Premier League season. So if that is the case, then you would think Norwich would be at the head of the queue of any potential suitors to get back out on loan. But I guess there's too many ifs in that statement at the minute, really, to know. I think if there'd been no injury and he was basically going back to Tottenham off the back of an unbelievable season, how he's not in the Championship Player of the Team of the season, sorry, I do not know. Find that the most bizarre omission going, to be fair. But then I think it would have been a difficult one to get him back, because, again, the reality is, because of the uncertainty at Tottenham, whoever the new person is, I'm sure first thing they're going to want to do is assess the squad they've got there at Tottenham, and that would have probably meant Ollie Skipp remaining for, well, the duration of the summer, pre-season, maybe the start of next season, given the window, as always, overhangs to the start of the new football season. So Norwich couldn't have simply waited. They cannot hang their hat on the potential for Ollie Skipp to return to solve what is a key position underlined by his performance levels this season, and even more so going into the Premier League. So I think if he hadn't been injured, I think they'd already be looking, and are looking, I'm sure, in terms of alternative options in that position, because they have to plan essentially without the prospect of that guy coming back. Otherwise, Webber isn't doing his job, is he, and the recruitment team around him. So whether this now, potentially, if it is an injury that requires a length of time on the sidelines, allows Norwich to still continue down that path to get another defensive midfielder in. But then if you get to the last 2 or 3 weeks of the summer window, which I think is the end of August, it officially closes, and Ollie Skipp is available on loan, you'd get him back all day long to compete with whoever else they brought in over the summer. Because there's a player who I think at 20 years of age, too good for the Championship, possibly not quite good enough to be a starting 11 for Tottenham at the minute, but certainly good enough for a Norwich team in the Premier League. So, and Daniel loves him. Daniel would have him back tomorrow if he could, but it's ultimately not in his hands. It's in the hands of the people who make these decisions at Tottenham, albeit you will say that, and Daniel referenced it recently, they have an excellent working relationship with Tottenham, irrespective of whether they've got a head coach in place or not now. Stuart Webber, Steve Hitchin, the chief scout at Tottenham, very well connected in terms of their relationship. So ultimately, it probably comes down to what Ollie Skipp wants. If the decision is put into his lap, and it's like, well, probably not at the moment for your first team at Tottenham, but if you want to go out and play, here's the options. And you would hope he must have enjoyed playing regularly week in, week out. He's spoken about that, how he's almost grown up. He's had to fend for himself in terms of off the pitch as well, leaving home for the first time. Why wouldn't he want to come back to Norwich, where he's got a head coach who believes in him and a team who will give him regular minutes in the Premier League? If you're that young man, 20 years of age, you've had a full season in the Championship, surely the next step now is to try and get as many minutes as you can in the Premier League. And if you're not going to get that at your parent club, I don't think there's many better options than Norwich in the Premier League next season. So we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. But yeah, I think I probably would agree. I think that injury indirectly might improve Norwich's chances of getting him back. But irrespective, they will have to go and get somebody else in, because you're not going to get Ollie Skipp back on the first day of pre-season, and that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, looking very unlikely. So I guess that will mean Jacob Sorensen playing at Barnsley gets a little opportunity or another opportunity to push his claims. From what I've seen of him in central midfield so far, I can't say I've been that convinced that he's a strictly defensive midfielder. He's looked a bit more of a sort of a traditional box-to-box central midfielder, really, from what we've seen so far. So maybe he needs that opportunity to get a bit of rhythm and some positional discipline, given that he's had to play at left-back so much of the season. But Tim Krul was orchestrating the songs towards Skip outside, one more year and we want you to stay and all that sort of stuff. So the fans who were out there made sure that Skip knows full well that they want him back. The third goal, Connor, Javi Quintilla in the 78th minute. I turned to you just after the free kick was given, hadn't I? Looked like a perfect position for Kieran Dowell to go for his hat-trick. And I said, why is Dowell not on this one? And then literally about 5 seconds later, Quintilla showed me exactly why.
Yeah, he listened though, didn't he? That was yeah. To be fair, I agreed with you. It did seem a little bit odd that he was stood over that free kick. Emi Buendia was as well, wasn't he? But certainly, I think the way they were both sort of shaping up, it looked like Quintilla fancied it, and yeah, he definitely did. It reminded me almost of Juninho. It was that sort of style, wasn't it? It was an excellent free kick. It's a shame we've not seen that on a bit more of a regular basis. And to be fair, I thought his performance yesterday, and probably bar that Watford game, he was also okay at QPR last weekend. I mean, look, we know what he is positionally, defensively, probably not his strongest areas. He's not as keen or balanced as or keen on the ball rather, or balanced as maybe Dimitris Giannoulis. But as an understudy, I think he's proven that even still his standard is pretty high, and he's got that obviously set piece capability in his locker as well, which you've seen at the early part of the season. Some of his corners, particularly at Huddersfield, were excellent. So it's just a shame, obviously, that injuries have prevented him from really showcasing, I think, what he can do at Norwich. Yeah, I still think as we sit here today that Giannoulis, he will be the option in the Premier League. I find it very difficult to envisage a situation where Quintilla is a Norwich City player come the start of pre-season as well. But what a way to sign off if that is his final game for Norwich City. Obviously, Giannoulis comes in against Barnsley. You should think now his suspension's over, and you can see how pleased everyone is for Quintilla. And you wait 1 week for a goal, and then you get two back to back. So it's not too bad at all. But yeah, I thought he was pretty good yesterday, and deserves the plaudits that will come his way for this little run. But ultimately, when he reflects on the loan, probably hasn't gone in the way you would have hoped, and that's largely, I think, because of injury rather than ability. Because when he has played, I think we've seen again glimpses of what he's capable of. So a little bit of a shame, but yeah, ultimately, if that's the way he's signing off, what a way to sign off.
Yeah, it's always been defensively that the issue is for me. Like that second half, well, even the first half yesterday was a little bit shaky, I thought, defensively. But second half, when Norwich were full throttle going forward, he looked to suit things very nicely. He seemed to have the rhythm. He had a bit of an understanding with Dowell and Cantwell going on. He was really pushing forward and really influential. Now, I think, Pad, that when he signed, the reported option for a permanent deal was 2.6 million, wasn't it? So if you're looking for a backup to Giannoulis or competition for Giannoulis, that's not a huge outlay. So unless there's someone that they really are convinced is a better option. Of course, you've got Sam McCallum in the mix as well, haven't you, coming back from Coventry potentially, who has now been, banking proper championship experience, but generally playing wing back. It's just going to be really interesting to see what they do. I think we all expect Giannoulis to be the first choice, but from what we saw yesterday, Quintilla, and in recent weeks, Quintilla is clearly a very popular lad in the squad, isn't he? He seems like from the few interviews we've had with him, he seems like a really friendly lad, and does seem to sort of, his face seems to fit almost.
Absolutely, and the celebrations of his teammates underlined how popular he is. And I've put that to Daniel actually after the game, and Daniel said it was actually quite cruel, was the word he used, in terms of leaving him out of some of those squads. There was a game recently, was it? It might have been Preston, where he, because of all the issues they had in terms of player availability, he came in, played, and then he was out of the 18 for the next game, which is quite a brutal way to do it. But obviously Daniel would turn around and say, well, end result is we're going back as champions. So he's done what he had to do. But for the lad himself, very difficult mentally to have to deal with that, on top of those persistent issues he had around the injury, which curtailed his early season, decent start, I thought, to his career at Norwich. Yes, defensively, suspect on occasion, but he was offering enough to be in the side, I thought. But ultimately, I don't think where Norwich are. Yes, they don't need to sell players. They're making that very clear financially, even with the pandemic hole from a lack of supporter revenue, that they're in a decent place to push on, but not to the extent where they could, given they've now, confirmed Younulis's purchase for in the region of 6 million, 6.2. I don't think you pay 2.6 if it is, and then park Quintilla on your bench. I just think that's type of deal isn't an option for Norwich in terms of the revenue they've got to play with. There will be other areas of that team, let alone squad, that are the priority, and any funds they do have available, I think, will be funneled in those directions. So, yeah, it will be. I think Byram's the key to me in that situation. If Byram is, as he demonstrated in his first season in the club in the Premier League, he was keeping Jamal Lewis out of that team, and on merit as well. He was excellent for a spell. Sadly, he got that injury against Liverpool, the hamstring issue, and we've not seen him since. So the huge question mark is, can he get himself fit enough to be in consideration for a Premier League squad place? And there must be a big question mark, and I'm sure that is in the minds of Webber and Farke and the recruitment guys over these next few weeks. These are big weeks now in Sam Byram's career, I would suggest. If he's able to physically declare himself available for the start of pre-season, then I don't see them actively going into the market and doing anything, because you've got Barley Mumba in the mix. Okay, he's maybe seen as more a naturally right-sided option, but could play there. Sam McCallum will come back as well. We'll get a chance, I'm sure, at the start of pre-season to maybe sort of try and convince Daniel he's a bit closer to his thoughts than he was, 12 months previous, where he played him in that League Cup tie, the first game at Luton, and he looked a bit short, to be fair, of what was required. And subsequently, Daniel arrived at the same conclusion because they sanctioned that loan return to Coventry. But he has played a lot of Championship football this season in a team who've achieved their objective of staying up. So, you would have thought he will have kicked on from the player we saw at Luton at the start of this season. That'll be an interesting dynamic. So I think there's a lot of moving parts to that left back situation. But ultimately, if we're just focusing on Xavi Quintilla, they won't be shelling out the thick end of 3 million to have a backup left back. It's just not financially something they'll be able to do this summer. There'll be far more pressing claims on whatever finance they've got available. But it'd be nice to see. I mean, we were talking about this after the game. Tete obviously and Mario. There's a little bit of sentimentality, I'm sure, about that final Carrow Road appearance for those two guys yesterday. I'm sure they'll feature at Barnsley as well. But it would be nice at some point, appropriately, whether it was the summer or next season, to try and get some of these lads back, maybe try and get the class of 2021 back for a Carrow Road home game, just to recognise their achievements, because there's another guy, okay, for the most part, he ended up on the margins of it, but, that when he was required in the last 2 or 3 games, he's played his part, Xavi Quintilla, and, a bit like Jordan Hugill, Daniel doesn't measure their impact purely in minutes on the pitch. It's how they've been within the group dynamic. And as Daniel himself said after the game yesterday, this is the best dressing room he's ever been a part of and never will be a part of. So that isn't just about quality and ability on the pitch. It's about the good characters, the good tourists almost that you have in and amongst it in the dressing room. And clearly that reaction that greeted his goal would indicate Xavi Quintilla is one of those.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how things shape up. The fourth goal then, Connor, arrives in the 85th minute. Teemu Pukki gets it. His 26th of the season. Ivan Toney also scored on Saturday for Brentford against Watford. So he is still 4 goals out in front on 30. And so you would have thought the Golden Boot is very much sorted now, which is a shame, really, because Pukki definitely could have won it with the chance he's had. And I suppose that follows really in this game. But I still thought he was really good. His running, the way he led the line, I thought he was a crucial part of it. He had one cleared off the line as well, didn't he? So what did you make of him?
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was good. What I would say is there's a lot of people, and we've done it before, to speak about the opportunities he misses, but then I think it fails to get mentioned, his persistence to keep going, to keep getting in those areas. I mean, Norwich are 3-1 up and the clock's ticking down. They look like they're going to win the title, and still there's a willingness to beat Raphael to that loose ball and try and nick a goal. So that determination, that persistence, I think you've got to admire. He's capable of almost smelling a goal, isn't he? And there's a reason that he scored 26 goals this season. That's not an easy feat. It's not something that comes about, and yet he's made it look normal. That's the reason that he's probably not in Norwich City's top 3 for the player of this season. So yeah, I'm pleased that he managed to get a goal, because it was 4 games I think without a goal, which for him is quite a prolonged period actually. And we saw the miss at QPR last week, and the misses that maybe were in this game as well, and you just wondered whether he'd forgotten his shooting boots again. But in the end, it was. And Paddy referenced the front 4 that Reading have got, but I thought Liam Moore was a big miss for them yesterday. And equally, if they do want to have success in the Championship, then I don't think you can put your hat on Tom Holmes and Gibson at the back, because they were mistake-ridden, really. There were a couple of moments where they played a loose back pass, and you've got to credit Teemu Pukki, because he was alive to that all the time. He was pressing them, he was trying to force the errors, and ultimately he got his just rewards, I think, in the end with that goal. And probably a reward for his work rate and his determination, getting in right areas as well. And for a striker, I think you've got to be willing to bounce back up, and often kind of misses can stick in your head a little bit, particularly if they're big ones and there's a few of them. You can kind of dwell on them a little bit, and with him it doesn't really feel like there's that sense. It kind of feels like the play resumes and he's back again. He doesn't need time to dwell on it, and I think that's what makes him so potent, particularly at this level, is the fact that he can move on from those missed opportunities and take the opportunities eventually that arrive his way. And credit to Norwich, because they've created enough of them this season for him to miss. Now obviously the debate will shift to the Premier League and whether those opportunities he does get, he needs to be more clinical with, because ultimately Norwich are going to have much fewer of them. But again, that kind of lends into the debate we've had again about bringing in an extra striker and that sense of competition, which possibly he maybe doesn't feel as strongly as perhaps he should at this stage. So, yeah, a very impressive season now. I think whatever happens, I mean, to score, was it 26 this season, 29 last time in the Championship, it's incredible. It really is. And that's even with a season this year where Norwich have shared the goals around a little bit more. So, yeah, he deserves a lot of credit. He's going to go into the Premier League as Norwich's first choice. He's loved by supporters. He's loved by Daniel Farke, and yeah, I think there's probably even a claim to say that he's improved this year in terms of his work off the ball and how he links the play and whatnot. So, yeah, really good steps for Teemu Pukki heading into both the Euros and then of course a Premier League campaign. So it's going to be a big few months for him, I suspect.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether he plays at Barnsley, given he's played a lot of football. You got Hugill and Ida both keen on minutes. You'd have thought he'll be on the bench at the very least, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if Teemu was probably happy to get his feet up now, and it made sense from Norwich's point of view with an eye on next season as well, not to flog him any more than you need to. But we shall see. But I just wanted to finish on the game, Pad, on Andrew Omar-Bamidele, because I thought he was really good yesterday. I thought the Watford and Bournemouth games were tough for him because of all the stuff that we've discussed in recent weeks. Those games were kind of strange matches, weren't they? And I thought he was quite quiet at QPR as well. And I've just had a look at the stats while Connor's talking there. He made nearly double the amount of passes yesterday that he did at QPR. He made the most passes of any Norwich player by 11 clear of Grant Hanley. He made 78. And he also made the most accurate passes. 70 of his passes were accurate. And as well as his passing being good, I thought we saw some real moments of composure from him yesterday, turning out of trouble, getting things right, where if he'd got them wrong, he would have been left with a lot of egg on his face. And it would have been one of those sort of alarming moments with a young player when you think, oh, this is coming too soon for him. But when you think he's an 18-year-old lad who's just had his first run of games in senior football, he has been really impressive on the whole, hasn't he?
100%. Yeah, I mean, did write about it yesterday that the Preston game, that was his first start, senior start. And really, he was just pitched in at the deep end in a big way. And maybe the adrenaline and the emotion got him through that day. That was a very decent debut. You know, sadly, he was involved in their equaliser, went through his legs, couldn't really be blamed for that. But that's 190 minutes. And, you know, you can't really judge. But now I think that was his sixth consecutive senior game, full game yesterday, 6 or 7. And and he looks just as composed as he was for me at Preston, and that's really exciting because, you know, it isn't just a one-off with him. He's, as Daniel likes to say with young players, you know, he's walked through the door and he looks very comfortable in that room. So I think they've got a massive decision with him now in terms of, do you think he is capable now of being part of a Premier League squad? And when I say part of course, he's not going to be ousting Gibson and Hanley. They're getting heavily linked with other centre-backs so that you can put your bottom dollar on. There'll be another one come in. Christoph Zimmermann will be back and available. So, you know, you're not asking him to be your in your 11 on the opening day of the season. But by the same token, as it proved 2 seasons ago, you know, you can get injuries in that area of the pitch, and then you might be down to the bare bones again. And could he do a job in the Premier League? And that's a big call. But I think it is now a debate. Whereas when he was getting in and around, him and Omatoy, and we're travelling with the team for a period there, sort of middle part of the season, just after the turn of the year, and he's basically making up the numbers. If we're being brutally honest, now he's actually shown over a consistent period of games, maybe he isn't that too far away from being, you know, under consideration for the 18 on a regular basis. So that's huge credit to that young man. Of course, the alternative argument is if he's not going to get any football, a bit like his compatriot Adam Eder, you know, if they're not going to get regular football next season in the Premier League, are they better served going out on a loan and getting a good loan? And I think a good loan now is a Championship club. I think he's probably too good for, you know, outposts in Belgium and Holland, with all due respect to those leagues, or, you know, even lower down the pecking order in the Football League. I think because what we're seeing at the minute is every bar he's asked to clear, he's clearing it, and he looks comfortable doing it. So let's push him now. And if it's not to be part of a Premier League squad, then a very good Championship loan. But yeah, I mean, yesterday there was one incident where Reading were threatening to break in the first half, and he's almost headed the ball upwards as if he's juggling with it. He was about 35 yards from his own goal. The ball's dropped, and he's cushioned the volley into Emi Buendia, and you just think, well, this is a centre-back. That's very impressive. You know, the technique to do it, and the willingness to do it as well, the composure. There was another one in the second half where Reading were threatening to counter, and he's read the game. That's what I like. His reading of the game is very good. You know, there's maturity he senses the danger, and he shifted out to the right back slot. Max Aarons had pushed further forward, move had broken down. Reading were coming on the counter, and he's got to the ball before Ajaria. I think the ball's getting passed out to him, and he's got across there, beating Ajaria to the ball, and then composed and played it back to another of his teammates. So, yeah, it's hard not to get overly carried away, but everything we're seeing so far, he's in the same rank for me as Lewis, Aarons, Cantwell, Godfrey. I think he could be that good. And but the key is now, and we've seen this in the past with Norwich teams, when they go through the leagues and maybe outstrip the development of their younger players at that given point in their own individual cycles. I think it's probably a stretch to suggest he could be really pushing to be in the Premier League 11, but maybe not so much to be in an 18 and being in and around the squad. So, you know, I'm very interested. There's a lot of interesting aspects and facets to Norwich's recruitment this summer, in and out. But that is very interesting to me, what they decide is the best next step for that young man. Is it keep him in the group, or is it let him go out and play football at a Championship level? Because you can guarantee there will be clubs in the Championship now who will have monitored him. They will have their own scouting networks, much like Norwich do, and they will be fancying taking that lad on loan next season. So, yeah, he's done his own claims a world of good. There's no doubt about it.
And centre-backs can be worth good money in the transfer market as well. When you think all the way back to Rio Ferdinand, but Harry Maguire, John Stones, if you can bring through a good homegrown defender with international potential, which, you know, I'm not going that far just yet, but in terms of Norwich's academy emphasis and that being a key revenue flow for the club, if you can develop someone like that, they can quickly be worth a great deal of money. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he develops. But fair play to the lad for the way that he's dealt with it all so far. And you never know, 18, he might have another growth spurt in him yet as well, because he already looks physically like he's able to handle it. So that's been a nice element of things, to have that fresh sort of injection of youth in amongst it all. Connor, just finally to finish off with then, the EFL Awards were Thursday night. So it's it's been a great few days for the club, really, hasn't it? As Paddy mentioned earlier, Max Aaron's beaten to the EFL Young Player of the Season award by Michael Elise, who we saw with that nice assist at Carrow Road on Saturday. He's only 19 and has had a great season. This is the award Max won 2 years ago. But otherwise, the big angle was finally Daniel Farke getting some recognition, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's long overdue, isn't it? Particularly when you consider, and I've spoken about this a lot, the period between relegation and the start of this season was 6 weeks, and the way that he managed that and managed to reset the mentality and also do all of that whilst almost improving Norwich City's style of play. And you mentioned the defensive record there. That's going to be the big thing. If they can maintain that in the Premier League, then I think they give themselves a much better chance. So long overdue, yeah, and it ends a succession of really weird kind of rejections, doesn't it, from the Manager of the Month award? But maybe his problem across the course of the season is that Norwich have been really consistent throughout, whereas other teams have had really good spells of form. And there'll be months gone where Norwich win probably 4 or 5 games pretty much every month, certainly for the last, well, probably since before Christmas, but other teams maybe have won 5 in months and then dropped off. And when that happens, I mean, Mick McCarthy maybe is the best example of that when he came into Cardiff and gave them a real major boost, and now they've maybe dropped off a little bit. And maybe that's the reason he's not won it. I'm not sure, but certainly in terms of consistency, yeah, that he warrants that award for me. And I know lots of people spoke about Ishmael and the impact he's had at Barnsley, but you have to look at it as in quality and put all of the job that he's done into context as well. That relegation was so painful and it was difficult to kind of digest, and there were people questioning him at the start of the season as well, as Pad mentioned, and he's managed to stick to his principles but equally tweak them, and he's not been snobbish in a way that he thinks it's his way or the highway. He's kind of adapted his approach to make it more durable this season and make sure that they head into the Premier League a better side, and a side that looks really they look like a Premier League team playing in the Championship, and we've seen that throughout this season. And it would have been easy, I think, for him to abandon his principles, abandon the young players, and go for experience and completely change his style of play. But we know he's not like that. And the fact it's ended with a Championship title and a team that, certainly in terms of points, is Norwich City's best. I think he deserves all the plaudits that's going to come his way. And this, for me, is probably the one that he was looking at. And I know he's mentioned it a few times. He obviously didn't win it 2 years ago when Chris Wilder won it. And obviously the Manager of the Month awards as well. So I think it did mean, he might play it down, but I think it did mean a lot to him, particularly because he was able to dedicate it to his coaching staff, who's right, haven't been in the spotlight much this season, but equally have contributed to Norwich City's success. So yeah, long overdue, well deserved, and hopefully it's not the end of the awards as Norwich head into the Premier League.
Yeah, and Farke really does trust his coaching stuff. You can see it every match day, can't you? Eddie Reamer is the guy who runs all the pre-match training drills and the rondos and the motivational speeches before, in sort of that classic manager way, I suppose. Farke swoops in at the last minute and says the crucial words. We barely even see Farke before the teams come out, do we? So very rarely do. You know, Chris Domagala is completely running the fitness side of things, Ed Wood and the goalkeepers. So, and the few times that we get up to Colney to see training before the pandemic, it was very much the case as well. Farke is the top man, and they are his generals who run things. So that'll be really interesting as well. That's a really, really nice element and deserving element of it as well, because as Farke said during the season, it's called the Manager of the Month or Manager of the Season or whatever, but that's a reflection on you as a club and as a team of how well you've done, isn't it? So thank you very much, boys. Thank you very much for listening. We'll leave it there for this week. As I said earlier in the show, absolutely loads to get stuck into on the EDP Evening News and PinkUn websites. Don't forget the papers as well, of course. It's that time of year, isn't it, when it's worth keeping the PinkUns and things like that to look back on in a few years. And we've got lots lined up. I won't give away too much at the moment. We'll keep some stuff up our sleeves. But the other side of Barnsley, we've hopefully got some really exciting things online, which you'll be able to get involved with to really savour this season and the title success. We're hoping me and Paddy will both be at Oakwell, but obviously we can't be 100% sure of that just yet during these COVID times. the FA Cup game, we had to sit in sort of the overflow press box area on the old wooden desks where my laptop nearly was broken. So looking forward to that. We're hoping to smuggle in our video man, Tony Thrussell. We might have to sneak him in our laptop bags or something like that so that he can get all that footage of the trophy presentation on the final day of the season. The match feels a little bit irrelevant already, a dead rubber, Barnsley just having their final position to play for. But nonetheless, we will bring you as much of it as we can, and we really do appreciate you consuming our content during these exciting times as we start to turn our attentions to the summer and the Premier League. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch up with you soon.